Privilege and honor to introduce speaker number 8, Chance Litton, The Life and Times of Mr. Spock. The Life and Times of Mr. Spock, Chance Litton.
Yes, the life and times of Mr. Spock. And not that green-blooded alien that you all know and love. And certainly not the wayward pediatrician that spared the rod and spoiled the children. No, this Mr. Spock is a cat. He's my cat. A black and white domestic short-hair. It's a known fact that women love things that are soft and furry. And my wife is no exception. When we were in college, she waged a campaign to get a cat. Now, as a boy, I had cats. And they peed on my clothes when I left them on the floor. And they scratched me when I tormented them. I like dogs. But even I had to admit that our apartment was too small to get a dog. So in the end, I caved and we went to the animal shelter to get a cat. And they had a lot of cats. And as we walked down the halls, they were bathing and eating and sleeping, doing anything but paying attention to us. They remained aloof, even in their imprisoned state. All except one. One little black and white kitten at the end of the hallway. He was glued to the door of his cage. He had a paw sticking out. He said, "Meow! Somebody save me!" And I rushed to him and I grabbed him. I had to take him home that day. Now in our small apartment, in the dining area, we had a full-wall mirror. And it was the bane of dinner-time conversation. So as we would eat, my wife would be talking to me, we'd be eating, and I couldn't help but look at myself in the mirror, fascinated by my own image, much to my wife's disgust. And sure enough, when we brought that cat home and we set him on the floor, I knew that we were brothers, because he saw his image in that mirror and he was drawn to it with a loud smack. And as he lay there, dazed on the floor, I also knew that this special cat was going to have some trouble. But we needed a name. I, of course, suggested Booger. My wife rejected Booger, thinking it undignified. So I countered with Mr. Booger. Also rejected. And then it hit me. About 20 years, he was a dead ringer, and I dubbed the cat Mr. Spock. And my wife agreed, being as big a nerd as I am. And there was much rejoicing. But everything didn't start out real smooth between Mr. Spock and I. We had some problems to work through. In our little apartment, we had a small bed, and my feet hung off the end of it when we slept. And just as I was going off to sleep, this furry creature would jump up under the blankets, and he'd attack my feet. He'd wrap his furry paws, and it wasn't too bad because he didn't use his claws. But then he would sink his big, pointy feet into my toes. And I would leap out of bed, and I would say, "Cat!" And I would chase him to the apartment. I'd grab him, and I'd drag him back to bed for mandatory cuddling. And that way I humiliated him in better behavior. Pretty soon, Mr. Spock and I were inseparable. Even when my wife moved up to Dallas, it's a 3-hour drive. I drove there every weekend and back. Mr. Spock rode shotgun. He'd sit in my lap, look out the window, and I'd pet him and he'd purr. Every hour or so, he'd get up and make a little tour of the car, check out everything, make sure everything was okay. But his favorite part of the trip was the chicken farm. About half an hour outside of College Station, there was a nasty industrial-side chicken farm. And let me tell you, folks, it was nasty. And when we drove by, Mr. Spock would stick his face in the vent, he'd put his ears back, and he'd go, and you could feel those chickens, like they were in there, in our car with us. It was disgusting. I knew if Mr. Spock ever got out around that place, he'd go straight there, and he would hunt those chickens down one by one. Because Mr. Spock was a great hunter. Not the greatest instincts. My wife, loving things that were soft and furry, wanted to get a hamster. I knew cats and hamsters don't mix. But my wife does what she wants in the end. It never. I'm sure y'all have the same experience. So we got the hamster, we got his cage, little pipes and sawdust stuff for him to run around in. Whenever we left the house, we put it up high on the shelf so the cat couldn't get to it. Sure enough, one time we come back to the movies, and there's the hamster cage on the floor, broken open, hamster clippings everywhere. It looked like a major cat-hamster battle at the zoo. So we looked everywhere for that hamster. We were tearing everything apart. Cleopatra! Cleopatra, where are you? And then we saw him sitting in the corner, bathing Mr. Spock. We were disgusted. But then the hamster was there. She poked her little head out from between his feet. It was perfectly fine. Mr. Spock would batter around with his paws. We'd get around and they'd play all the time. So instinct's not too great, but he was still a great hunter. You can ask my wife. Whenever she walked through the house, she had to be on guard. Because the cat might be lurking behind a door, or around a corner, underneath a piece of furniture, lying in wait, setting an ambush. And when the time was right, he would spring, and he'd wrap himself around her legs, and she would scream and run through the house. The best pounce I ever saw him make. I walked in the office, and my wife was sitting typing on the computer, and there was the cat, right behind her chair, with his ears back, his tail going 100 miles an hour. And I said, oh. I didn't say anything. So it was going to be too funny. Sure enough, Mr. Spock leapt into the air, floated there for a second, defying all laws of gravity, before plowing down on top of her head and wrapping his paws around her face. She jumped out of her chair, screaming, cat flying behind her, fur everywhere. It was hilarious. I know it took a couple months off both the lines. It was worth it. Mr. Spock's hunting days are over now. Pretty much he spends most of his time outside the bathroom, waiting for someone to come sit on the porcelain cat washing chair so he can rub up on them while they do their business. So to any of you guys out there who had cats that beat on your clothes or scratched you when you tormented them, let me suggest to you, there's a cat somewhere out there that you can have a special bond with. It can be your buddy, like my buddy.